Let's take a bit of a closer look at dodging and burning, which for me personally, it's my favourite part of the retouching process. What is dodging and burning? Dodging and burning is the process of adjusting the luminosity, whether it be making something lighter or darker in an area. And it's a pretty simple process to do, although it does take practice to be able to do it efficiently and reach a level which is to a high standard. The dodging and burning phase is incredibly important because this is what is really going to bring the file alive. It's really going to give that high-end polished look to an image which you're working on, and it really allows you to even out those skin tones. It does take a long process, but it is totally worth it for the final outcome. What we're trying to do is we're trying to even out certain areas of skin across the entire image. So for example, if we look at the cheek here, we can see this is a darker area. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a blank layer and do kind of like a markup to show you. So we grab green. So for example, this area here is darker than the areas which it's been surrounded by. And the same for these areas. And like these areas, these areas, these areas. These are all inconsistencies within the skin, which is what dodging and burning can really help you with. And like these areas, and trying to create a nice transition between the highlights, midtones, and the shadows. That is essentially what dodging and burning is. And like these areas, they'll dodge really well, and up here, and up here. That's why when I was doing the cleaning, I wasn't really too fussed on trying to fix these sort of things, because it can be fixed really simply and with a bit more control in the dodging and burning phase. Like over here, and pretty much everywhere. I mean, the entire skin is going to need dodging and burning in some way, especially like around this neck area. Like we can completely sort out this area, like these sort of areas. It is going to create a large amount of color shifts and saturation shifts, but that's not a problem because we fixed that in our color correction stage, which of course is our dodging and burn stage. And that's why it's important to have these processes and these workflows to guide you to the final step. Like all of these areas which are darker, we can bring up. And same with some of them which are too light, like these are too light, we can bring these down. That's a bit too bright as well, we can bring that down. So we get a nice skin texture. You're also going to be adjusting the texture, you see. As you're lightening and darkening areas to match, you're going to be flattening some kind of texture out or making it more enhanced. So you do really need to be careful. And that's why it's kind of an art to dodging and burning, because it is something which takes a lot of training with your eyes to get it right. I mean, you can use help layers which do help you pick out what to dodge and burn, and that's going to help you out immensely, but it can only show you so much. You have to be able to have your trained eye to be able to spot them yourself, or to know what to dodge and burn. I mean, just because something can be dodged or burnt, it doesn't mean it should be. You've got to keep it in this natural realm of this balancing, whether it's photoshopped or not being photoshopped. You're something which you really got to be careful. Although it is harder to overwork a file when you're dodging and burning it than using other techniques, it still can happen. So I'm going to just dip over to another file which I have open, and we're going to look at the different techniques which you can use for dodging and burning. So this is just a extract of the photograph which we're going to be working on for this dodging and burning stage, and you can see in my layer stack here I have 3 different ways of dodging and burning. We've got the traditional dodging and burn tools which are in Photoshop, we can use soft light layers, and we can also use the curves method. Let's have a look at the dodge and burn tools themselves. So on the left hand side in Photoshop you've got your tools, and this one here is the dodge tool, and below that is the burn tool, which have their own different tool subsets as well. The thing is with these dodging and burn tools, if I just create a new layer and I try to use them, for example, let's work on the highlights here, I'm gonna dodge this, it's not having any effect on it. What happens if I turn this up to 100%? It's still not having an effect on it. And the reason why is because these traditional dodging and burn tools, they need something to be able to dodge. There's nothing in this layer. We need to put something in it. Because unfortunately, there isn't any select current layer and below, for example, like in the clone stamp tool. So we need to give this layer something to work with. So I'm just going to delete this layer. And I'm going to go to Layer, New, Layer. And I'm going to call this Dodge. And I'm going to put this down into soft light blending mode. And I'm going to need to fill it with soft light neutral color, which is a 50% gray. So if I fill that now, and now, bearing in mind I'm on 100%, so it's going to do it quite a lot. Now if I work on the same area, it's going to dodge that area up. So just before and after that, you can see that's brought that up considerable amount. So let's just go back in step and just get rid of that. And let's have a look at the burn tool. It works in exactly the same way. Once again, you need that something in the layer to be able to work with, and you can adjust the exposure, and you can also change the range of it. This is both available on the dodge and the burn tool, so you can focus it on, say, the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights. And the exposure is pretty much kind of like the opacity, which you would be working with a normal brush. So if I put this on burn at 5%, and if I come into this area here and just burn this down a bit, it's making subtle changes. If I target this in the highlights now, I bring these down, and if I toggle this layer on and off, you can see just here that it is having an effect. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit. The problem which I find with these tools is they are, you need to adjust them based on what you want to do. So you have these highlights, midtones and shadows, which if you're moving around areas, that's something you're going to have to change quite frequently. So it's not something which I find as a very quick way to dodge and burn. I mean, you can work them in the sense that, say if I have this at 5%, and I'm dodging on the image, if I hold out, that's actually going to swap this to a burn brush. Although the icon doesn't change, it's actually switched it to a burn brush, so I can now burn in areas. It's always going to use the settings which you had in the brush when you last use it. So if I now toggle this on and off, I dodged it, remember, first of all, but then I burnt it, so it's going to be a darker now. See how that works? The next method I'd like to talk about is using the soft light layer. Now this is just a blank layer. So I'm going to come up to Layer, New, Layer, and once again select soft light. And on this occasion, I'm not actually going to be filling this with 50% grey. You can if you wish, but you don't have to. So if I now pick my brush by pressing B, and I'm just going to set my brush settings as I spoke about in the Photoshop customization. And I'm going to make sure that my brush palette is set to black and white, which you can do by just pressing D. And you can flick between the black and the white color just by pressing X. Like that. Okay, what's this going to allow us to do? So I can now paint with white in this soft light layer, and it's going to have an impact on the luminosity and contrast values of everything below it. So if I just start working in here, it's going to work around here. Yep, just dodge these bits up. And keep going around here. And then I'm going to press X to change this to black, which means that I'm going to be darkening it, so burning, and I'm going to paint in some of these areas which I think need darkening a bit. So some of these really bright highlights on the cheek, I'm just going to move those down a bit, and this area down here, let's switch back to white and just dodge this area up. And let's have a look at the before and after on that. I've been able to make quite a few changes there without really making too much effort. I haven't had to switch between the various different tonal ranges of highlights, midtones and shadows. I've just painted with black and white, and because of the nature of the soft light blending mode, that's having the effect of dodging and burning in all tonal ranges. It is a really, really good method to dodge and burn, but if you're doing it with just white and black, you can run into a few saturation issues, especially if you're bringing up darker areas. So you're dodging, for example, this area here. If I dodge this in, you can see it's actually gone a bit grey, which is something which we would have to fix later on in the stage. But we do have an ability to be able to try and rectify that. Because you're just painting with a paintbrush on a blank layer, you can actually select a colour which you want to use. So if I select this cheek colour here, you can see that's now changed it in my brush palette. And if I now come again over here and dodge this, I'm essentially painting with that colour and adjusting the luminosity without affecting the texture. That is one really good way of trying to limit your colour correction stage. You can set up different layers for a dodge and burn if you do want to. You'll be able to just switch between the layers however you want. I've set it up on hotkeys on my pad, but you can do it however you want. And of course, if you want to see what you've actually painted in, you can alt click on the eye and it will bring it up. The only problem with having this as a blank layer is you don't get to see what you've done so well. So for example, if I had a 50% grey layer, which we're gonna, just like we did before, but I'm going to use the action for this. And now if I go extreme and just paint in here, and now have a look at it, you're going to see it a lot easier. If I just lightly paint over stuff, you can see how it does become a lot easier to see what you've actually done, and change it to black, and you can really see how that's had an effect on the image. As you can see, that is a really good method and a very popular one of dodging and burning. I tend to use this method for more doing global changes. So say if I got rid of this and let's create a new soft light layer and a blank one. And the way I would use it is if I wanted to just enhance the highlight in general, I would just do more these sort of strokes on it. And that's pretty much how I use just the soft light dodging and burning method. My main go-to method for dodging and burning is the curves. So let's have a bit of a look at those. So to do curves, dodging and burning, you need two curves. So we're going to create a new one and we're going to pull this up to about there. And I'm going to invert the mask by holding Control and pressing I. And I'm going to call this dodge. I called it dodge because we raised the luminosity, and this one I'm going to bring down, invert the mask once again, and if you haven't guessed, we're going to call this burn. And I'm just going to swap these two layers around. Once again, if I use the brush, I can now start working on the layer mask itself, and that's going to reveal, if I'm painting in white, what the actual adjustment layer is doing. You can't use different colors for this one because it's an adjustment layer. It's already preset that it's doing a certain shift to a certain area. So you can only paint with white on these. So now if I go to my dodge and I start dodging in these areas, and if I want to burn, I just need to come down and change it to the burn layer. And once again, just paint with white. And if you do have it set up as hotkeys on your keyboard or something, then you can just switch between the layers on the fly without having to go over to the layer stack, which is pretty quick. And that's pretty much the three main methods which you'll use for dodging and burning. And you can just work around the image until you get the result which you're happy with. You will encounter a lot of color shifts and saturation shifts with the curves layers depending on the areas which you're trying to work in, but as we know, that's something which we fix straight after the dodging and burn phase anyway. So let's go back to our main file and start doing some dodging and burning. So I'm going to start with the curves, and as we were just working on it, let's have a look at the cheek. So my brush is set up with a pressure sensitivity in the sense that it's going to apply more the harder I press on it and not change the size. So I'm just working around these areas, pressing on at different amounts depending on how much I actually want to bring up those certain areas. I've dodged and burned so many files now that I have the muscle memory to be able to push down however hard I want to for that particular area. That's one of the reasons why I do have my brush configured in this way, is because I spend so much time doing dodging and burning. It just makes my life a little bit simpler. Just switched over to the burn. It's going to burn in these areas. And what I'm looking to do is create these even tonal transitions between different areas. It is a process which takes a while, but it is totally worth it. There's no quick way to dodge and burn. It is a bit of a labour of love, and it's something I really enjoy myself. I find it a bit therapeutic. Just working around this cheek area. I come down onto this lip area now. Let's just zoom out and see how that's looking. I'm just going to toggle this on and off. Looks good, but let's see if we can add something in to help our eyes a bit. So if you use the action which we gave you to be able to set up the workflow, you'll notice in the dodge and burn folder that there's a D&B help. So I'm going to activate this. And let's have a look at what it's done. Let's knock off the contrast. So it's got a desaturate layer here, which is just a black and white adjustment layer, just as it is, and it's been set to color blend mode, which means it's just making everything black and white and keeping the contrast as it was before and the luminosity. There's another curves adjustment above it, which is to deal with the contrast. So you can come in and adjust this by darkening it or lightening certain areas so you can see certain things better. If you knock out the color, your eyes only need to concentrate on the luminosity. So it's easier on your eyes to see it. So it's good to bounce back between a black and white and a color, and you'll end up getting the best results. You don't want to pull this down too far, otherwise you're going to be starting to work on things which you don't really need to work on. It's going to end up looking too smooth and overdone, so you don't want to take it too far. Maybe round about this sort of contrast shift. So let's have a look at that. You see that is still quite a lot. You may not even need to take it down this far depending on what you're working on. But let's leave it like this for now, and you can see that it is made things more apparent for us which we need to work on. So let's go to our dodge layer and continue with dodge. Just trying to even out these transitions, but not too much, because we still want the skin to look natural. We don't want it to look fake, because then people know that it's been heavily worked on. But we do want it to look perfect and polished. Let's move to burn layers, and let's just burn this area down here by the lip. Back over to dodge. Just coming in, trying to work out how this is going to go. It's a process of building it up to the stage which you're happy at, and knowing what you want to dodge and burn. More than likely, you're going to be dodging more than you're burning, but the burn areas are still really, really important. You don't want to just dodge everything up to make it match in tonal range, because then it's going to make the face look a bit flat. You need to keep that dimensionality to it. So burning at the same time as dodging is a really good way of doing that, instead of leaving it as a second step. When I first started doing like dodging and burning, I would just do the dodge first, then I would go on to the burn, and I found that I wasn't getting the natural looking results which I wanted. So I'm doing them now at the same time so I can keep a hold of everything, and also I don't miss anything because I can just flick between the layers really, really quickly. So it means I have a clear direction and I know exactly what needs to be done. I'm not having to have an afterthought about something. So let's press on with this. Let's just move these areas. These areas are pretty standard, pretty easy ones. There's nothing too extreme to be able to do on these. It's just a case of coming in and just working on them. Just spending the time on it. Let's do a bit of burning around here. Let's just zoom out a second and have a look at this area. Let's just turn that on. Let's just have a look at what I'm looking at now. Is this area here. I want to make that area a bit of a nicer transition over to here. So I'm going to work with a bit of a bigger brush, and I'm going to start with the burn. So let's burn this. Just lightly doing it. I'm going to bring up this area, the side of a cheek and a nose. It is keeping the dimensionality of a face, that shadow there, so we don't want to completely remove it. I just want to lighten it a little bit, so it makes the transition less harsh between the two areas. Let's come back in there. Let's zoom in a bit. If I was to work on this area like zoomed in quite far all the time, then I may lose that dimensionality which we're trying to keep and maintain, and in some occasions even enhance. But staying zoomed out or zooming out frequently allows you to keep a better idea of what needs to be done. It's quite easy to get lost in it when you are really close, because you're just thinking of the issues, or that needs to be brightened, that needs to be darkened. But you really need to step back and have a look at the file as a whole to see if it's going in the right direction. Just gonna burn these areas. Too bright. Let's dodge a touch more. Burn, sorry, just a touch more there. And let's dodge that a bit more. Just working around this cheek area again. And let's take the black and white off and have a look at this. And let's just toggle that area on and off, which I've done. You can see that's already made quite a bit of a difference, and it's giving that real polished look to the file. Let's have another look at an area which is a bit tougher. This neck area is full of lots of tonal transitional changes. Because the skin's different on the neck than it is on the face, it's going to have these larger sort of lines between the pores and the wrinkles where you bend your neck and you raise your head. It's all going to have an effect on the skin's elasticity. So you need to kind of bear that in mind, that there should be some hint of realism to it as well. But let's start by reducing these lines just here. Let's come in a bit closer. See, that's too far for me. Let's just burning these down, these lighter areas. And let's dodge up these. This is going to cause a bit of a colour shift on these areas, but that's fine. I don't mind that at all. I'm going to darken that down a bit. I want to brighten this area up. I think it's giving a bit of a weird sort of shadow to it. And I'm also going to darken down to the other side of it. So I'm using the dodging and burning together. That's gone a bit too far, so I'm just going to back up. Let's dodge that area there. It's looking good. Just coming around, just trying to even these. I'm constantly thinking of the bigger picture, what's it going to look like when I zoomed out. So don't want to work too in depth on this. So let's just back out and have a look at that now. Just talk that on and off. See, it's getting better. It's getting a bit more well-rounded. It's getting a bit more pleasing. I'm going to darken this area down quite a bit more, I think. And here. I'm going to dodge this up, which is going to cause some colour issues. Let's work back in this neck here. Just burning these. I want to burn this a bit more. It's a bit too bright there. And dodge this up. Let's just burn the edge around a little bit. Let's just dodge through the middle with a bit of a bigger brush. Let's do a bit more burning up here. Let's burn that area. Let's dodge that up. As you can see, it really does take time, but it's worth it. There's no shortcuts in retouching to get to that final image. I mean, there is some things which can use to speed up, but it really is a case of putting in the time and the patience for it. And there is no better method to doing this sort of work than dodging and burning. So let's just have a look at that now. So you can see I've made that area look a lot more pleasing. It's less bumpy. It's a bit more uniform. It's gonna end up with a better final result. But I've still kept some of those natural sort of skin textures to it. So I'm not destroying anything. I'm keeping it natural. The only time I would ever really go in and get rid of those completely was if I was requested to. It wouldn't be something I would be looking to do because I want to keep this natural. Let's turn the black and white on and let's have a look at this. Might reveal some extra bits. So yeah, let's dodge this up. Some of these other areas. See, now I'm starting to spread out from that one area to try and make it match so it doesn't look off. And that is typically something which I will do. So I'll start in one area and I will spread out for a little bit. Then I will stop working in that area. Then I will go to another area and spread out from that. And eventually every area kind of merges together. Let's just go back to the lips a second and let's just dodge this up. And in that crease there. And working around the same for everywhere. There isn't one bit of the skin which isn't going to have a brush stroke on it at some point within this dodging and burn process. Back down here a little bit on the collarbones. See a lot on the skin. There's lots of different variation changes in the skin on the chest here as well. So this is going to take some time. I'm just going to come away from doing the skin for a second and we're going to have a look at other areas which we could possibly dodge or burn. So one area which is something which I typically do is burn down the eyebrows a bit to create a bit of better contrast. So I'm going to grab the burn and I'm just going to come in to the eyebrows and just darken them down. And not so much on the other one because it is thicker. But we are just going to burn this one down. And I'm going to come across the eyelashes as well and just burn those just a bit, not too much, otherwise it will look off. Same with this one. And also I'm going to do a bit of burning on some of the butterflies in the hair. So dodging and burning things like this is a really good way of creating added dimension. So I'm going to start back, zoomed out, and I'm going to dodge some of these areas which are catching the light. Because this image is so focused on these butterflies, this is about this sort of concept, we really need to accentuate those. So that's what we want to do with dodging and burning, because it is so much easier. Because the best way to accentuate them is by changing the contrast or changing the color, and we don't want to change the color on these, so we're just going to play around with the contrast, which is what dodging and burning is doing. And if I change to burn and come into these other areas, look at those feathers. Maybe use a bit darker in the blacks here, on the wings, through the middle. If I darken those down a bit, then there's a bit of a transitional change from the dark to the light a bit more. So it's going to give a bit more of a three-dimensional property about it. And let's just turn the dodging and burning on and off here. So you can really see where I've made adjustments. And at the time when I'm doing it, it may not seem like I'm doing much because you haven't seen it in a grander scale, and it's a build-up, it's a process of, it's a compound effect on everything. But we're already getting to quite a good stage. What I'm going to do now off camera is I'm going to spend a bit of time just going around and dodging, burning the skin a bit further to get it to a place where I want. There is a lot of work to be done, so it is going to take a bit of time, but I will see you in a moment. Okay, I'm back now after I've done pretty much all of the dodging and burning except for the nose area, which I'm going to do now. What you've always got to be bearing in mind when you're doing dodging and burning is you're trying to even out the tones, but also keep the dimensionality of the face itself. So I'm going to continue to do this. I'm going to do some burning. Let me just make sure I've got my brush set up right. And let's continue. So this bit on the nose here, I definitely want to darken this down. It still stands up a bit. So I'm just going to be brushing along around here, just trying to reduce that a bit. It's going to need some dodging as well in these areas, but let's just start with the burn on the nose. So I want to be coming in here as well. It does take a long time dodging and burning, like I said, but it is totally worth it. And you'll get to see it in a bit more detail in a moment when I show you the masks and what I've done and some before and afters as well. I'm just going to continue with this. So it's just darkening down those areas nicely. I'm going to switch to the dodging now. I'm just going to bring this up a bit. I don't want to bring it up too much, otherwise it is going to lose that natural shape. But I'm going to do it a bit. And around here as well. Back to burn, work at the top of the nose, the bridge, and just coming in here nicely. Switch back to the burn a bit again, just work on this bit. I'm just going to zoom in a touch further, just so I can have a bit more of an accurate brush stroke. Let's just zoom out a bit and have a look at that. I still think it needs a little bit more, not too much more, but just a bit. I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go too far dodging and burning the nose here, just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to grab the dodge and I'm going to dodge this up and I'm going to burn this area down here. Now, just by doing those few strokes there, I've now changed the shape of her nose, which in some circumstances that might be what you want to do, but we want to keep the structure on this particular file quite natural. So if I just before and after that, just pay attention to the nose and you'll see how much it's actually changed. So I've completely changed how the lights fell on the nose. I mean, I was changing it before anyway, but it was a bit too much when I did it then. So let's just go back a couple of steps and get rid of that. And now you can still see, if I turn it on and off, I've kept the natural contours of the nose there. So you can see it's a highlight here, there's a shadow there, and it goes back into the highlight. So it's showing you that there's some shape change there. But let's have a look at the actual overall file itself. Actually, let me just quickly dodge this up a little bit as well and burn down the side. It's not perfect there just yet, but I'm just going to continue on now. But let's have a look at what I've actually done as a whole. So I'm going to zoom right out, and you can see I've worked on the skin, and I'm going to toggle the dodging and burn layer off. So I'm just toggling it off. You can see where it started from and where I got to after the dodging and burning, and how much of an impact that's actually had on the file. You see, that is quite a big impact. And if I zoom in on the skin, like on the cheek here, you can still see that I've retained all of the texture. It's still got those micro transitions as well. So you have to pick and choose as you go along what you actually want to dodge and burn to make it look right. As I said, you can go overboard, but it is harder to do that because it requires you to put in more time to go overboard. I'm just going to toggle this on and off. You can see all like these cheek areas, I've evened out the transitions, the bumpiness. You can see round by the lips as well, especially round by the lips. That's like a major improvement there. I've still kept the shape there, so you can see it has gone into a shadow. I haven't like completely dodged it up to make it look flat, because then that would be not biologically correct. It would be a change in the actual shape of the mouth, which isn't right. So I'm just gonna toggle that off. You can see there, and I've done that all around the image and including on the eyes. But let's have a look at the actual mask, which might be able to give you some kind of scope of how long this actually took me to do. Let's have a look at the burn mask. You can see there is a lot of work which has gone into it, and every single bit of white on here is a brush stroke which I've done. So you can imagine that doing all those individual brush strokes does take a long time. And if I go to my dodge layer, you can see there's even more strokes on this. So I have done a lot more dodging on this file than I have burning, but I've got to a result which I'm really, really happy with on this. There is no kind of set time which you should spend dodging and burning either. Same with like cleaning. You just got to go until it's done. To know how far you've got to go with dodging and burning it's all about training your eye, and it's very much a case of looking at the right sort of references online and looking at like campaigns and magazines. They're the ones which are going to give you the best resource to how far you've got to go, because they're the current standards which people are working to or trying to achieve themselves. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Just going to toggle it on and off. As I said, it's always good to be toggling things on and off to see how far you've come. And if you just look in the lips as well, you can see how I've reshaped this. Ignore the colour changes, because that's going to be fixed in the next step. If I just toggle it on and off, you can see how I've changed the lip shape to make it a bit more pleasing, a bit more plump, just by working with dodging and burning layers. Okay, so I want to do a touch of global dodging and burning. Personally, I'm not even sure if it really needs it on this file, but I do want to show it for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to come over to my Actions tab, and I'm going to run the Soft Light Blank layer. Like we spoke about, I'm going to be painting with either white, black, or a colour if I really, really want to. And this is going to be applying things in a bit more of a broader kind of stroke. Instead of those really tiny brush strokes we're doing, I'm looking to do more global changes. So if I want to, for example, if I wanted to accentuate the highlight here, I'd just be brushing on just a little bit. Same on the chin, but I want to also darken down the cheek just a touch. I'm doing very, very, very light strokes here. If I toggle the layer on and off, you might be able to see the changes, but it's very, very subtle changes I've made there. Maybe a bit on the forehead as well. Just trying to add a bit more dimension to this where I can. Just do a bit more on the chin. I'm going to come down onto the collarbones as well, and just give them a couple of strokes. I am using black and white. I could use colour if I wanted to, but on this occasion I don't think it needs it. I'm not doing anything drastic which is going to make it look too white or too black. I can get away with just keeping the default colours. Let's just do another little flick on the eyes as well, just to brighten those up just a touch, just a tiny touch, and maybe a bit on their nose as well, maybe a bit around here. And I'm just going to darken down this highlight just a bit in the corner of the nose going down into the lip. Maybe if I do a bit of a sweep there, and let's just toggle that on and off. So that's how I would use the soft light blank layer for dodging and burning. I'm doing more kind of general things and bigger strokes. We're going to affect the overall look in a bigger way than the curves adjustment layers. For me, that just works really well. So I can keep the two separate techniques for different things. Of course, you can mix them around and do whatever you like with each different dodging and burn technique, but I like to have a certain way of doing things. I think it just works better as an order for myself in my workflow. It makes me more efficient anyway. So I'm just going to toggle that on and off. Like I said, I'm not necessarily sure if this really needs it, so I'm just going to discard this layer for the time being. And now let's move on to some color correction.